Welcome to all of you joining us from LinkedIn, YouTube, and La Vanguardia. Remember that this session will be available for viewing on demand on your LinkedIn page as soon as it is over. And I also welcome all of your comments, which you can post during the session or during our Q&A. My name is Christoph Zott. I'm a professor of entrepreneurship at IESE Business School, and I'm joining you from our Barcelona campus, which is a little bit deserted these days, but it's as beautiful as ever. What I would like you to take away from our session this afternoon are three main things about what entrepreneurs can teach us, how we can react positively to crisis. The first thing is the importance of adopting an entrepreneurial mindset. Stay positive and keep looking for opportunities. Challenges and opportunities are two sides of the same coin. That's a fundamental truth about entrepreneurship. And we can see this daily in the actions of hundreds of thousands of entrepreneurs all around the globe who do not give up in the face of adversity, who continue and who do not let themselves get overwhelmed by crisis. So you yourself, please, don't get overwhelmed by the current crisis. Focus on the actionable opportunities that come with it. So that's lesson number one. Lesson number two is as important, and that's don't forget about your so-called soft skills. They are crucial. I'm talking here about something as soft as emotions. That's something I've learned through my research. It's very, very important because uncertainty evokes anxiety and fear, and these are very powerful emotions. So you need to do all you can in order to manage your own emotions and pay attention to your own emotions as well as those around you. Because by doing so, you give yourself the psychological resources that allow you to be resilient in the face of crisis, and you encourage others and motivate others to keep helping you, which is as important. Then the third thing that I would like to share with you is now is a very good time to rethink not just what you're doing, but also how you're doing business. Take a step back and reflect. Look at the big picture and think about how you should change your business model to adapt it to a new tomorrow. So now, more than ever, is the time for business model innovation. In fact, those are the three main lessons that I would like to share with you. I wanted to give them to you up front, and now let me go a little bit further into details. So the first thing I would like to share with you are a number of stories from IESE entrepreneurs. You know that at IESE we embrace the case method for teaching. I also use this in my research, and I have assembled a number of cases here, very short caselets and stories that will allow you to appreciate a little bit how entrepreneurs have reacted or are reacting to the current crisis. First, this is the story or the case of Ivan Rodriguez and Luis Pares, who are IESE EMBA students, graduated in 2011, and they founded a company called Parklick. This is a company that provides reservation solution for car parks. I wrote a case on them. And you can imagine that, in this time when personal transportation is basically close to non-existing and nobody wants to park their car anymore in public garages, it's a very difficult time for such a business. And before teaching this case a few weeks ago in the MBA program, I reached out to Ivan and to Luis to ask how they were doing and how they were coping with the crisis. And that was just at the beginning of it. And Ivan and Luis wrote something back to me, which was very remarkable. They said, believe it or not, after we cursed and reluctantly accepted the situation that we're in, literally with zero sales, both of us are thrilled with the opportunities that lay ahead of us due to the COVID crisis, such as competitors going bankrupt, M&A opportunities, reducing cost, finding and removing inefficiency, rockstar hirings, time out to catch competitors, etc., etc. And they said this does not only help the P&L in the short, in the middle, and in the long term, but it also helps the morale of the team. So despite the severe disruption in their business that these two entrepreneurs are currently experiencing, they keep up their entrepreneurial mindset, their belief in a better future, and their focus on building the business. Second example is Anna Meikes, the CEO and founder of Neuroelectrics, which is a company based out of Barcelona, used to be known as Star Labs, and as an IESE alumna 2015 in the AMP program. And she gave a talk in the Global Leadership Series at IESE 2 weeks ago. And I found just very remarkable of how she started out her talk. The very, very first thing that she said, the very first thing indeed, was that she said she remained optimistic and positive, and that she had already seen so many opportunities due to COVID-19. Now, that's not what you would expect an executive to say in the face of such an unprecedented time on crisis. When I reached out to Anna after the talk, she explained to me with a little further detail what she meant, and she gave me an example. She said, look, right now, the Food and Drug Administration in the United States allows us to send home our devices to patients who are reluctant to go to the hospital because they're afraid, and so they can receive treatment at home. I think I forgot to tell you what this company does, and so just let me say that the company is producing electrical devices that stimulate the brain and thereby help treat brain illnesses like epilepsy, depression, or dementia or Alzheimer. So, the whole kind of crisis speeds up, for Anna at least, speeds up the development of her products, and it provides some sort of a revolution in telemedicine and health. The third example I wanted to give you is an alumnus of our MBA program, Bruno Lea, who graduated in 2014. After a while, he launched a search fund to acquire the French distribution of Haas, which is a machine tool manufacturing company. And Bruno participated recently with a project in an MBA course of mine. Likewise, I asked Bruno, so, how do you cope? And Bruno said, look, it's not very fortunate that, a couple of months after buying the business, we're hit by this crisis. And certainly the COVID crisis will not be easy, will be long, and it will represent a new normal after the crisis that will be different from the one that there was before. But as a result, I have to take risks and I have to do things that have never been done before. So he said, it's time for me, it's time for innovation, for digitalization, for investing in technologies. We need to become more digital and able to offer digitized and customized solutions. So if we look at these very different companies, parking solutions, medical devices, machine distribution, what they all have in common is this kind of relentless focus on opportunity and refusing to get brought down in terms of morale and in terms of mindset by the crisis. Of course, what one would normally expect is something like this, which is firefighting in action. And of course, these entrepreneurs have had their dose of it, which is cost cutting, hiring freezes, emergency financing, focusing on the core business, improving operational efficiency, postponing investment, etc., etc., etc. But the entrepreneurs that I've just mentioned don't stop there. They don't stop there. They say, and this is very important, we have to do this, yes, but we cannot afford to lose our focus on the opportunity. So you might say, yeah, these entrepreneurs, truly special people with a special DNA, with special character traits, eternally optimistic, super creative, innovative, daredevils, risk takers. They love risk. Nothing can bring them down. They're a very special breed of people. Now, people like Zuckerberg, Richard Branson, Anita Roddick, Elon Musk, and many others who are very famous as entrepreneurs. Now, you may be thinking implicitly, I'm not like one of them. I'm not. I'm Amancio Ortega. So, what can I learn from these people? They seem to be superhuman. Now, two things. Number one, there's nothing wrong with getting inspired by them. No problem with that. And number two, you should reconsider what we know about what truly makes them stand out and what makes them special. It is not their DNA. It is not their character traits, but it's their mindset and it's their behaviors that come from this mindset. Behavior such as resilience. Resilience means simply don't give up when the going gets tough. When the headwinds are strong, keep sailing through. Let me share with you one of my favorite stories about resilience. This is not from an entrepreneur, but from a very famous explorer called Ernest Shackleton, who was sailing in the Antarctic and exploring the Antarctic at the beginning of the last century. And his ship was aptly named Endurance, and he and his crew had very bad luck because one day before reaching shore, they got trapped in pack ice, and the ship never was able to get away from there. So it kind of slowly drifted away from the shore. The crew had to leave the ship because it was getting crushed. So they camped out on the sea ice until that disintegrated too. So they made it to their lifeboats, and they also made it to an island, dark and unhospitable, gloomy, godforsaken island called Elephant Island, where the whole crew waited for rescue that never arrived. So at that point, Shackleton decided to leave the island on a small lifeboat with a few selected crew members, and he tried something that probably goes down as one of the most, let's say, heroic deeds somebody has ever done. And he crossed the ocean in this little boat, almost 1,500 kilometers, until they reached South Georgia Island, where not only had they had to cross the ocean, but they then had to march across the island to reach civilization, from where they sent a rescue party to get the rest of the men back from Elephant Island. And that was the day when Ernest Shackleton rescued all of his crew members. None of them lost their lives. So you can read about this. This is one of the most interesting books I have ever read, and that really gives you an insight into this very inspiring story about resilience. Now, coming back to where such resilience comes from, let's compare and contrast two definitions. My answer to you, this resilience comes from two things. Number one, from your mindset, and number two, it also has to do with how you manage your own emotions in the face of such shocks, in the face of adversity. So number one, mindset issue. Let's look at the definition of crisis. This is a definition from Merriam-Webster Dictionary: an unstable or crucial time or state of affairs in which a decisive change is impending, especially one with a distinct possibility of a highly undesirable outcome. Yes, we can all understand that. Now, let me compare and contrast that with a definition of entrepreneurship, which goes like this. It's about creating value by building businesses, regardless of whether they profit, non-for-profit, social purpose, under the following conditions: conditions of high uncertainty and severe resource constraints. Now, basically, entrepreneurship has a lot in common with crisis, because when you look at the definition of crisis, there's a possibility of a highly undesirable outcome, a possibility, which means risk, there's uncertainty, and highly undesirable means we will probably get into resource trouble. For example, we'll get problems with customers, we will lose customers, or we don't have any customers. So, in other words, what's kind of the new normal for most of us is the normal for most entrepreneurs. The conditions that they're dealing with day in, day out, the crisis that they're living through every day, almost every day, and in quick succession very often. When, for example, a very important customer cancels a contract, or a supplier pulls out of a very, very important project. Those are the things that are very familiar to entrepreneurs. Now, in terms of their skills, how do they manage in those situations then? How do they manage in the face of crisis? What do they learn from kind of riding this roller coaster repeatedly, the roller coaster of emotions? And so this is something that I set out to do some research on. It's an article that was published a year ago in the Strategic Management Journal. And I wanted to share with you 5 techniques or behaviors that entrepreneurs use in order to manage their own as well as other people's emotions, to build up their resilience in the face of adversity. Now, number one thing, this is about their own emotions. When you're going through a hard time, it's actually good to take a step back and don't just get focused and bogged down with a focus on the presence. But think about the longer term. Think back to where you're coming from. So I had some entrepreneurs who told me that we're really going through a lot of trouble these days. But when we think about where we're coming from, a year ago, 2 years ago, what did we have? We had a piece of paper. It was a business plan. Now look at what we have today. It's true there are setbacks along the way, but over the long term, we're making progress. So focus on the long view. Give yourself perspective. The second technique that these entrepreneurs, the most successful ones, are using is they're considering rewards, and they're focusing on rewards that go beyond economic gains. So not just money, but look at emotional rewards. Look at what you're getting beyond the financial payoff. So, for example, in my research, there was one entrepreneur who built a whiskey distillery. Now, that's a very long-term project because whiskey takes 10 years until it's ready to be sold if it's whiskey. And so you have to go pretty much cash flow negative for 10 years. That's a tough ride. But this entrepreneur, she told me that, it's very tough, but on the other hand, it's a very exciting time. It's very, I'm very passionate about this. And if I think about what I could be doing instead, it would be boring. So, comparing to what you would be doing instead, something that will also give you psychological resources. Third, with respect to other people. You always think about, the anxiety that you're living through, other people live through as well. So the number one advice here is that you have to maintain an open and transparent dialogue with other stakeholders, customers, with employees, with suppliers. It's very, very important to be transparent. For example, with your employees about the financial situation. Quintessential. Don't hide anything. Honesty and integrity are not to be traded. The fourth thing is that in terms of how you come across, think about this. Use your emotions in terms of with a certain control in their display. Be very generous with sharing your joy, with sharing your passion, with sharing, your excitement about what you're doing. But when it comes to fear, when it comes to stress, try to appear calm. It's very important because calmness conveys certainty. It's a certainty type emotion. So, in times of great uncertainty, you want to put something as a counterweight, which is certainty, right? Which is kind of try to be calm. You might paddle like a duck under the water, which is what you have to do. But over the surface, be calm. And lastly, very important, in terms of other stakeholders, like employees, customers, show consideration and support. Be kind. Treat them as people. Listen to them. Empathize with them. Now more than ever, This is extremely important. And these kind of 5 behaviors really stood out and distinguished the more successful from the less successful entrepreneurs, clearly distinguished them in our sample. Everybody's doing something along those lines. But those who pay very high conscious attention to those techniques are the ones that are successful in the end, and in terms of riding out the crisis, in terms of showing resilience, in terms of enduring the hardship. Now, those were the first 2 things I wanted to mention. Number 1, the importance of the mindset and positivity, and number 2, the importance of paying attention to emotions. Now, doing all this, what do you deploy all these kind of actions for? Look at this number. This is from a recent alumni survey that IESE has launched just, I think, about 10 days ago. And it depicts the number 1 issue. This is the number 1 issue that came out of which people, IESE alumni, are worried at the moment. And this is the business model. It's not about, the number 1 worry was not revenues. The number 1 worry was not hiring or, retaining people. The number 1 worry was not about work-life balance, but the number 1 worry was about business model innovation and how you can adapt your business model to tomorrow. So in terms of business model innovation, you need to have a framework for how you think about doing business tomorrow. And I'm working. I've been working on this now for the past 20 years, and this is my framework. So I'm not going to go into the details of this framework because I'm going to give you a handout as part of this talk. And this is going to go into the details, but there are 4 questions which are important that will help you think through, reflect on your business model, which is number 1, what activities are we currently pursuing and are they important? Secondly, how are these activities linked? Thirdly, who is performing those activities? Should we be doing everything that we're currently doing, or could we work with third parties? Could actually customers do the job? And the last question, the important question, of course, is the why. Why does this all make sense? Does it create enough value for everybody involved? And is there a value proposition for everybody in it? Those are the important questions regarding business model innovation. And if you're curious to learn more, I have a forthcoming book, which I will shortly kind of show to you. In terms of if you're curious about how you can manage, what kind of skills allow you to innovate your business model, the following things have come out in another research piece of mine. Number 1, think outside of your industry, which is kind of what I call here industry spanning. Don't look inside your industry, which is what most of us are doing, but look outside. Look to companies that have nothing to do with you at the moment. Look to the Googles, look to the Twitters, look to completely different businesses and get inspired by how they're doing business. Second thing is think in terms of systems. Complex system thinking is very, very important. And that's, we have a tendency, of course, now to focus internally and focus on the efficiency of our companies. Now, you may want to think about the big picture. Then the last thing here is, now that's something that really kind of surprised us, which is powerful centralized decision making. That's basically what we found was that all of those companies that we studied and that came up with innovative business models had decentralized teams and diverse teams, but at the end of the day, there was one who called the shots in terms of business model innovation. And we interpret it in the following way. If you let the team make the decision about the business model innovation, not much will survive because it's not clear that everybody agrees on what should be done. In our cases, it's kind of the founder who, there was one of the founders who finally stood up and said, let's do this. Okay, so these are kind of the skills. As I said, I have a book, and it's coming out in the summer. It's called Business Model Innovation Strategy. If you're curious, I recommend that as a resource to you. Another thing is if you're interested in kind of participating with a project, in a course that I've created at the IESE, you're more than welcome to do so. This is where IESE students work on problems that are brought by external companies such as Siemens or La Caixa or SEAT. If you have a problem, if you have a business model issue, you would like students to work on this, look for the call for challenges over the summer. I have a number of questions here that were coming in, lots of interesting questions. I'll get to them. Let me just kind of summarize. Okay, so key learnings. Let me summarize what you've heard me say. Key learnings from entrepreneurs. From what I can tell, number one importance is kind of adopt an entrepreneurial mindset. Think opportunity. Every problem is also an opportunity. Number two, show resilience. Don't give up, even if the going gets tough. Take inspiration from Ernest Shackleton. He did not give up. Many entrepreneurs know how important this is. If you give up, there's no business, you don't get a second chance. But if you keep going, you may find a way of how to get out of the current problems. Then number three is manage emotions carefully and thoughtfully. Soft skills. Think emotions and think about the behaviors that I've tried to share with you are very good and useful. And then lastly, rethink your business model. Now is the time. Now is the time to reflect on whether your today's business model will be apt for tomorrow and will be the best one for the future. And in fact, don't just think about it as a one-shot thing, but think about this as a continuous process. So in fact, it would be good if you could develop a business model innovation strategy. Once again, this is something that all of those 5 things that we're taught day in, day out by the great entrepreneurs who are doing, well, or you might say doing their magic, but who are actually doing their work and building companies all around the world. All right, so I have a couple of questions. Let me see. So Ganesh asked, what are the psychological resources you are referring to? So by psychological resources, I mean kind of the energy. I'm asking entrepreneurs, one of the questions I'm asking them is, what gets you out of bed every morning? Given to what many of them go through, we call these sometimes at IESE, we call these near-death experiences. Essentially, you have a runway of 3 weeks with cash, and you know that after the 3 weeks, the game will be over. So what gets them out of bed every morning? What's this energy? That's what I mean by psychological resources. The willpower and the energy to give it their best shot. That's the psychological resources of the entrepreneur. Another nice question. Ignacio asked this question: how can you protect yourself from the very negative environment of news, opinions around us? Very good question, because it happens to all of us, and it happens to me as well. I can tell you how I lifted myself up in the past few weeks. One thing is talk to entrepreneurs. Talk to entrepreneurs. And I've had a series of conversations over the past 2 weeks, and the kind of energy and optimism those people transmit is very contagious. So, talk to a lot of people who are supporting entrepreneurship, angel investors as well, and then also read books like this one, because it shows to you that even under the most severe and dire circumstances, it's possible. It's possible to resist. It's possible to endure. Okay, more questions. Could you tell us the relevance of corporate governance to crisis management? Well, that's a very good point. That's a very good point, because it allows me to tell you that all of the talks that we give in this series are recorded, and they will be available for you for viewing. And the corporate governance issue was an issue that Professor Jordi Canals talked about in a very good talk last week on Thursday. So look at it on your LinkedIn account. Okay, other question. Let's see. Entrepreneurs must be prepared for other entrepreneurs to enter their turf as disruptors. Is this going to be the test of resilience and EQ? Yes, yes, this is one of the challenges that entrepreneurs are dealing with, which is competition. But let me tell you that, in my work with entrepreneurs, in my daily work with entrepreneurs, and this is really why I love my job, because I have this privilege of interacting with entrepreneurs who are very, in my view, are very special people by what they do, not not what their DNA is, but by what they do, how they act. Um, and when they build companies, their number one concern is not always competition. I mean, competition is something that they keep in mind. Of course, you have to put this in the business plan, because at the end of the day, you want to build a company that creates a competitive advantage. That's true. But I think the first thing on an entrepreneur's mind, at least in the early days of business building, is value creation and assembling the resources, making the project, making the venture, making the opportunity happen. So of course, then when you're dealing with competition, it can lead to the kind of blows, and it can lead to the kind of crises that we've been talking about. And then deploy the various techniques that I have talked about, and that you can read a little bit more about in the handout that I gave to you. And those of you who are really very academically interested, you can also, of course, look at the academic articles. Forget the introduction section, forget the literature review, but only focus on the findings. Because in my work, I'm using the case method. And so the findings are a very lively description of cases. Now, somebody asked whether I can show the cover of the book again, which is this one. It's called Endurance, Shackleton's Incredible Voyage. The author is Alfred Lansing. And I must say, this book I owe to an entrepreneur and venture capitalist who was a guest speaker in one of my classes. And it was his Bible, and he held it up and he said, when I invest in people, I look for people like Shackleton, people who can sail through the very, very rough waters. And I just found out that he named his new company after this man. So it's a very good read. I hope you found some nuggets in this talk, that you found it interesting. Once again, let's find inspiration from the entrepreneurs, of which there are many around us. Help them if you can, because they too, of course, are going through a very difficult time. But I think it's a give and take. You help them, they will certainly give you something very valuable back. So I think I'm now more or less at the end of our talk. So remember, I should tell you that, remember that this session will be available for viewing on demand on LinkedIn as soon as the live streaming is over. Tomorrow we'll have another talk at 4 p.m. Here at Central European Time in Spain. And this is where my colleague Philip Mocoso will look at the tourist industry with two guest speakers, Raul Gonzalez and Jordi Mestre, who both lead large hotel groups. And of course, this is going to be hugely interesting as well. The session will be in Spanish. And for more information, I invite you to visit the IESE website, www.iese.edu, and click on our open access resource page for information on all our upcoming online sessions, as well as a number of resources that help you with crisis management strategies. Thank you very much for your attention.